Here are your examples for 7-1. 7-1 is about congruence and transformations. So let's take a look at our first subject here, identifying congruence. First of all, you can just skip this first part here. We're not going to worry about the previous page. We're not going to do that. Two figures are congruent if the second can be obtained from the first by a series of rotations, reflections, and translations, or translations. So there could be a series of these things. As long as we can get one figure to move exactly over the top of and be the same size and shape as the other figure through a series of rotations, reflections, and translations, then we can prove that they are congruent. Remember, congruence is all about same size and same shape. So that's what this is about. Let's take a look at what that means. Okay, in problem number 1, you're asked to determine whether or not this figure is congruent to this figure, and you're supposed to do it by using a series of transformations. So the first thing they want you to do is reflect this triangle, and you can see that if we reflect over this line here, B becomes B prime over here, A goes the same distance away from the reflection line, A prime over here, and of course C just moves straight across. So now we've changed the orientation of this triangle here to similar to this triangle here. So now the next step we would take would be then to do a translation. We can translate it. We can move C prime right over to X. We could move B prime to Y and A prime to Z, and if we did that physically, you would see that the yellow triangle would map right over the top of this, and it would match up perfectly, and we call that mapping onto. So we could map A prime, B prime, C prime, this triangle, which is this triangle here, we could map it onto this triangle, and that's the way we refer to it, map onto. And once we prove that, we have proved congruence. Okay, let's try another one, problem number 2. It asks us to reflect the red figure over a vertical line. We're going to try to show congruence between this figure and this figure. So the first thing we're going to do is map this over a vertical line. So imagine a vertical line through here. This square would reflect to here, this square would reflect to here, etc. And you can see that each of these squares reflects, and we have this figure here. Now once we take this figure, we can move it over here. Okay, and now the next thing we want to do is try to translate this, and if you take a look at it, it works really well except for one case. This square would transfer to here, this square would translate to here, this one to here, this one to here, this one to right here, but unfortunately this square right here would end up right here, and it does not cover this one, so we can say no, this is not congruent. So we've shown that they're not congruent. And imagine you can look at this, and you should be able to, after you do these for a while, kind of picture this in your mind's eye and realize that this square would flip onto here, and it's just plain not going to work. Please press pause and do letters A and B. Make sure you tell the reasons and what transformations you used in order to get one of those congruent to the other or not congruent to the other. The next thing we're going to talk about is determining the transformations. If you have two congruent figures, you can determine the transformation or series of transformation that maps one figure onto the other by analyzing the orientation or relative position of the figures. Let's talk a little bit about what that means. If it's a translation, then it's a matter of the length is the same, so we're going to just and the orientation is also the same, so we're going to be able to just slide, and both would slide the B to B prime and the A to A prime. Okay? In the case of a reflection, again, we have length is the same, but the orientation is reversed. What they mean by that, in this case, A is down and left of B, and in this case over here, A is down but right of B prime. Another way to look at this, I'll move over here. Another way to look at this is like this. If we were reflecting, let's say we had a figure, we'll move it up here. Let's say we were reflecting and we had a figure that looked like this, and we were going to reflect it over this line. Instead of this arrow, so to speak, pointing that direction, after we reflect it, it's going to be pointing in the opposite direction. That's what we're talking about when we talk about orientation. Now, when we talk about rotation, it's very similar. The length is the same, but the orientation has changed. In this case, A is down well below B, and in this case, it is actually pointing up. Or to look at it another way, if we talked about this being our rotation, if we rotated in this direction, it would move from that orientation to this orientation, where this is like the arrow pointing in that case, and in this case it's pointing that direction. That's what we mean by a changed orientation. At problem number 3, Ms. Martinez created the logo shown, this logo right here. What transformation did she use if the letter D, right here, is the pre-image and the letter P is the image? Are those two figures congruent? So we can start with the pre-image. Rotations or reflections change the orientation. Rotate the letter D 180 degrees about point A. So if we have the letter D here and we rotate it 180 degrees on this point here, it would flip around. This would flip down to here. This part of it would flip to here, etc. And we would have now what looks to be a letter P instead of a letter D. But it's still not in the same position as up here. Okay, so the next thing we can do is translate the image up. So we can translate this letter P that we rotated and move it up, and it would look like this right here. And now we can compare this to the original image, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. But now we have to ask ourselves, is it congruent? The first thing we would say in our answer is Ms. Martinez used a rotation and a translation. Those were the two things we did. Here we rotated, here we did a translation. Here we did a spin, and here we did a slide. The letters are congruent because the images produced by a rotation and a translation have the same size and shape. We didn't change the size or the shape of the letter D in order to make it look like a letter P. That's basically what we're saying. Please press pause and do letter C.